Kendall Wilson as Alva Vanderbilt.
And I'm Liliana as Jay Gould. Okay. Millionaires defined the Gilded Age and set a precedent for American businesses to come.
One of these millionaires was Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was originally a poor Scottish immigrant who came to America with pretty much nothing. He was a father of American steel, investing everything he had, even in times of depression. He used a business tactic called vertical integration, which is owning everything in your supply line, from the steel mines, the railroads that carried it, to the business that sold it. The only brand that touched Carnegie Steel was Carnegie.
Someone who used a completely opposite business tactic was John D. Rockefeller.
John D. Rockefeller used something called horizontal integration, opposite of vertical integration. Horizontal integration is using trust in business unions to be buddy-buddy with everyone that you worked with. John D. Rockefeller owned the Standard Oil Company and worked closely with railroad tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt. He worked with everyone that touched his product, but he was not the only one who owned the stuff that touched his product.
What is your name?
I am John O'Connor.
Now, Rockefeller, how did big American oil start, and how did it change the world?
Well, he slowly got into, his money-making career by being a bookkeeper, and then started buying, he ended up doing an oil Rockefeller company, which took off. And I think a lot of people knew oil was going to be big, but I think he realized how big of a deal it was going to be with, the creation of the railroad and vehicles going around. And his start of his trust in oil and how big it is even today, really showed how business-minded he was and how much money, and I think money was a big part of it as well. But I think he understood how much oil was going to be worth, so he just kept consolidating oil, monopolizing oil, because he knew it was going to be a big part of the future.
Possibly the most famous millionaire to this day is Cornelius Vanderbilt, who leaves a legacy even to this day.
Vanderbilt owned very, very famous rail lines, like the New York Central Line, and he built the Grand Central Station in New York. Vanderbilt was known for not being the most ethical of these millionaires, with people like Carnegie being much more morally superior than he was. Vanderbilt did not own or build some of the most famous lines, like the Union Pacific and Central Pacific, but the way he monopolized rail lines on the East was revolutionary.
Vanderbilt was not the only person to profit off of these rail lines.
The Credit Mobilier Company, who was commissioned to build the Union Pacific and Central Pacific, stretching from Omaha, Nebraska, all the way down to San Francisco Bay, pocketed almost $23 million in the time that these railroads were built. The U.S. government offered to pay for these railroads to be built and provided land grants for these railroads and many others. The Credit Mobilier Company took advantage of the U.S. government and asked for way more money than they actually needed. This time was pretty corrupt, and a lot of businesses would do this because there was really no laws telling them that they couldn't.
The pros of the railroads were that the Union and Central Pacific Railroads facilitated trade with Asia, connected the West to the industrial Northeast, and changed the American economy permanently for the better. It stimulated farming in the West instead of solely in the South, as farmers could now ship over crops that could not be sold only locally. Some of the cons of the railroad was that it separated the bison herds. It was much easier to eradicate the bison, and it encouraged white settlers to settle on native land. Nowhere-to-nothing railroads were railroads built solely for optimism and didn't really have any business purpose. Farmers suffered from crippling rail rates and lack of government oversight regarding rail lines. Only the Central and Union Pacific Railroad received government loans to build the rails, but 4 more transcontinental lines received land grants. Connecting Puget Sound, the San Francisco Bay, Santa Fe, and New Orleans changed America forever.
Next, we'll talk about Native American conflict in the Midwest.
The Sioux, or the Lakota, who lived primarily in South Dakota and Nebraska, were considered the ideal native by white people at the time. They were great warriors, mostly self-sufficient, and were incredibly intelligent.
There were many attempts to take the Lakota's valuable land.
The Lakotas successfully beat off the U.S. military multiple times, but as Heppers said, they won the battle and lost the war. With chiefs like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, the Lakota were able to defeat the military very quickly and very efficiently when they had to. But without the bison to eat, and without the resources that they had always had, it was impossible to keep the Lakota off the reservation, just what the U.S. military wanted.
Hi, what is your name?
My name's Luke Horsman.
And what do you think about Native American reservations?
I think they're bullshit. They had home field advantage and still lost. They don't deserve reservations. Bruh.
Okay.
I think it's bullshit, and I don't think they deserve any more privileges than white people.
Next, we're going to talk about Red Cloud, who is known as the Traitor of the Sioux.
Red Cloud, who was originally very anti-white encroachment, was the diplomatic leader and chief for the Lakota peoples. He went out to Washington, D.C. various times to talk to the U.S. military, and eventually they decided on creating the Standing Rock Reservation in South Dakota. Red Cloud thought that his people could not live outside of the reservation, because without the bison, they couldn't eat.
So was he really a traitor if life was impossible outside of the reservation anyways?
The reservation originally encompassed over half of South Dakota, but this quickly became smaller and smaller, leaving just little bits of the Standing Rock Reservation that was once.
Likely the most famous Lakota chief was Sitting Bull, and he was one of the last leaders to live off the reservation with his people. He was famous for being the military commander and spiritual commander for the Sioux people. Though he is best remembered for his outstanding military feats, his art and principles still has a lasting effect on natives all over the West. He fought tooth and nail against the whites for sovereignty, being the last man on the Standing Rock Reservation to surrender his Winchester rifle to the American military. Sitting Bull endorsed the Ghost Dance religious movement in his later years, a religion based on reclaiming their traditional native values and preciousness of the wild, once thought almost lost due to white encroachment, their dance. Sitting Bull was killed by native police officers on the reservation due to an investigation on his ties to the Ghost Dance religion. The Gilded Age had lots of immigration. Most immigrants were Italian, Irish, Eastern European, or Asian for railroad work. Industrialization was only able to happen due to droves of immigration. Ellis Island allowed in more than 12 million immigrants while it was in use, and railroad companies advertised American land grant sales even in Europe.
Liliana, and I just immigrated here to America from Italy on Ellis Island. I'm with my son, Tony, and my tall, dark, and handsome husband, Salamunka.
Hello, my name is Apolina again. I'm so scared to work in a factory because the working conditions are so unsafe. And the sanitary condition in New York is just terrible. I'm worried that my little son Tony will not have a safe place to go to school or play outside.
Most immigrants in the United States at the time did not feel represented at all. Most poor people in general did not feel represented at all. Liliana and I went out downtown to see if poor people still felt like this today.
Do you think our political system is able to represent all Americans, including you?
Right.
Think so?
Next question. Do you think that America is divided into two?
I do.
How so?
Racially, I do feel that way.
In any other way?
Well, our government now isn't like it was, when I was growing up at all. I think it's getting worse. They're more corrupt.
More corrupt?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Related to politics, do you think our political system is properly represents all Americans, including yourself?
No.
Okay, can you elaborate on that?
Well, like I said, the government, they're governing themselves pretty much. I don't think they take into consideration what the people want.
Criminals in the Gilded Age were pretty much anonymous due to lack of records, identification, or legal employment.
Police Detective Alan Pinkerton of Chicago developed the first criminal registry system in the United States and began to spread the use of mugshots.
Invented by Alphonse Burlington in France in the 1880s, mugshots quickly helped catch criminals all across the country.
We still use mugshots and a criminal registry system in the United States today. One thing, though, is that some criminals still will never be put to justice. We would like to thank everyone who made this video possible, especially a huge thank you to Duncan.